There are moments in life that remind us of the power of love, sacrifice, and remembrance. This is the story of a boy who, despite his pain, found a way to honor his late mother with a simple yet deeply meaningful gesture. Knowing how much she loved a particular cake, he decided to buy it for her one last time, an act of love that will bring tears to your eyes. There are moments in life that remind us of the power of love, sacrifice, and remembrance. This is the story of a boy who, despite his pain, found a way to honor his late mother with a simple yet deeply meaningful gesture. Knowing how much she loved a particular cake, he decided to buy it for her one last time, an act of love that will bring tears to your eyes. Ever since he was little, his mother had always brought home that special cake on his birthday. She would light a candle on top and watch him make a wish with a warm, loving smile. No matter how difficult life was, she never failed to bring joy to his special day. But now she was gone. The warmth of her embrace, the softness of her voice, all had become memories he clung to desperately. On what would have been her birthday, he walked past the familiar bakery where they used to go together. His heart ached at the sight of the cakes on display, each one reminding him of the love and care his mother had shown him. And then he saw it, the cake she had always loved. His hands trembled as he stepped inside. The scent of fresh pastries filled the air, bringing back bittersweet memories. As he stood at the counter, the cashier greeted him with a smile. "Would you like to buy something?" she asked kindly. He nodded, pointing at the cake. "This one, please." The cashier carefully placed it in a box, tying it with a ribbon. "A special occasion?" she asked, making small talk. He hesitated for a moment before whispering, "It's for my mom." The woman smiled warmly. "I'm sure she will love it." He forced a small smile, unable to explain further. Holding the box tightly, he left the bakery and made his way to the place where she now rested. The cemetery was quiet, the soft rustling of leaves the only sound accompanying his footsteps. Kneeling before her gravestone, he placed the cake gently on the ground. "Mom, I got your favorite one," he said softly. "I know you can't eat it now, but I just wanted to bring it to you, just like how you always brought it to me." Tears welled up in his eyes as he took a deep breath. "I miss you so much. I miss your voice, your laughter, the way you used to scold me when I made a mess. I would give anything to have you back, even for just a moment." A gentle breeze passed through, rustling the trees as if the world itself was listening to his words. He closed his eyes, imagining for a brief second that his mother was there beside him, her hand resting on his shoulder, telling him she was proud of him. As he wiped away his tears, he took out a small candle from his pocket and placed it on the cake. Lighting it with trembling hands, he whispered, "Happy birthday, Mom." The flame flickered, dancing in the wind, and for a fleeting moment he felt at peace, because love never truly fades. The candle flickered gently atop the cake, its warm glow casting soft shadows on the gravestone. He sat there in silence, watching the flame dance in the evening breeze. Though he knew his mother could not physically be there, a part of him felt as if she was watching over him, smiling just as she always did. He closed his eyes for a moment, allowing himself to relive the memories, those small, precious moments that now felt like treasures. He remembered the way she would hum a soft tune while cooking, the way she would ruffle his hair after a long day at school, and the way she would hold his hands tightly when crossing the street. A lump formed in his throat. "Mom," he whispered, his voice trembling. "Do you think I'm doing okay?" The wind picked up slightly, rustling the leaves in response. He wiped his eyes and let out a soft chuckle. "I know. You'd probably tell me to stop crying, right?" Just then, the sound of footsteps echoed behind him. He turned around to see an elderly woman walking toward him, holding a bouquet of white lilies. She gave him a kind smile before placing the flowers on the grave next to his mother's. "You must have loved her very much," the woman said, noticing the cake and candle. He nodded, his fingers tracing the ribbon on the cake box. "She was my everything." The old woman sighed softly. "I lost my son years ago. No matter how much time passes, we never stop missing them, do we?" He looked up at her, seeing the sorrow in her eyes, the kind of sorrow that only those who had lost someone dear could truly understand. "But love never fades," she continued, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. "As long as you carry her in your heart, she will always be with you." Her words struck something deep inside him. He had spent so long grieving, feeling like he had lost her forever, but maybe, just maybe, she was never truly gone. He took a deep breath and smiled faintly. "Thank you." The woman nodded before stepping away, leaving him alone once more. He turned back to the cake, watching the small flame flicker against the darkening sky. Then, slowly, he made a wish. Not for his pain to disappear, not for time to turn back, just for the strength to keep moving forward, carrying his mother's love with him. The candle's flame wavered, and in that moment, he felt as if his wish had been heard. The candle burned softly in the dimming light, casting a golden glow over his mother's name on the gravestone. He sat there, knees drawn close to his chest, feeling the quiet presence of the world around him, the rustling trees, the occasional chirp of a bird, and the gentle whisper of the wind that seemed to carry unspoken words. He stayed like that for a long time, lost in thought, until the sky turned a shade of deep indigo. Just as he was about to leave, he noticed something strange. The cake remained untouched, the candle still flickering, but beside it, where there had been nothing before, now lay a single white feather. His breath caught in his throat. He reached out, hesitating for a moment before picking it up. The feather was soft, almost weightless, as if it had been placed there by something unseen. A shiver ran down his spine, but not out of fear, out of something else entirely. A quiet realization washed over him. "Mom, was that you?" Tears welled up in his eyes, but this time, they weren't just from sadness. For the first time since she passed, he felt an overwhelming sense of comfort. It was as if she was trying to tell him something. Not with words, but with a gentle sign that she was still with him. He closed his fingers around the feather, holding it tightly against his heart. Maybe love really never fades. Maybe those we lose never truly leave us. With a deep breath, he looked up at the sky, where the first stars had begun to twinkle. "I'll be okay, Mom," he whispered. "I promise." And in that moment, the wind picked up ever so slightly, carrying his words into the night. The night deepened, and the cemetery grew quieter. He remained seated, staring at the feather in his hand. It was strange. Something so small, so delicate, yet it filled his heart with warmth. He couldn't explain it, but he didn't need to. He just knew. After a while, he carefully tucked the feather into his pocket, stood up and dusted off his clothes. His legs felt stiff from sitting too long, but there was a newfound lightness in his chest. He took one last look at the cake, now illuminated by the soft glow of the candle. With a small smile, he whispered, "Good night, Mom." As he turned to leave, a familiar voice called out from behind. "Hey, what are you doing here so late?" Startled, he turned around to see his childhood friend, Mia, standing at the entrance of the cemetery. She was holding a small lantern, her eyes filled with concern. "Mia," he blinked in surprise. "What are you doing here?" She hesitated before walking closer. "I was on my way home when I saw you. I figured you'd be here." Mia had known him since they were kids. She had seen how much he loved his mother, how much he struggled after losing her. While others had offered their condolences and moved on, Mia never stopped checking in on him. She glanced at the cake and the candle. Her birthday, right? He nodded. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then, Mia reached into her bag and pulled out something small, a neatly folded napkin. She unwrapped it to reveal a tiny slice of the same cake. I thought, maybe you'd want to share. His eyes widened. She smiled softly. I know you always came here alone, but you don't have to be alone all the time, you know? His throat tightened. He hadn't realized just how much he needed to hear that. With a small nod, he sat back down and Mia joined him. They placed the small slice next to the cake, letting the candlelight glow between them. They didn't need to say much. Just sitting there, sharing a quiet moment, was enough. For the first time in a long while, he felt something shift inside him. The pain was still there, but it no longer felt unbearable, because now he knew he wasn't alone. And as the wind carried the scent of the cake into the night, he could almost hear his mother's laughter, gentle and warm, lingering in the air. The candle flickered softly between them, casting warm shadows on the gravestone. The night was calm, and for the first time in a long while, he didn't feel the crushing weight of loneliness pressing on his chest. Mia sat beside him, silent but present. It was something he appreciated about her. She never forced him to talk, never demanded that he move on like others did. She simply stayed, offering quiet companionship in his moments of grief. After a while, she spoke, her voice gentle. You know, I think she would be really happy that you came here today. He let out a small breath. Yeah, I hope so. Mia looked at him carefully before continuing. And I think she would want you to be happy too. His fingers tightened slightly around the feather in his pocket. Happiness. It had felt so distant, so unreachable since she passed. Every day had been a struggle just to get through. He turned his gaze upward, watching the stars shimmer above. I don't know how to be happy without her. Mia was quiet for a moment. Then she reached into her bag and pulled out a small notebook. She flipped through the pages before handing it to him. Then maybe start small. Write down one thing each day that makes you smile. Even if it's something silly, like a good cup of coffee or a funny joke. Just start somewhere. He stared at the notebook in his hands. The cover was plain, a soft blue color, but something about it felt inviting. Why are you doing this? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Mia smiled softly. Because I care. And because your mom isn't the only one who wants you to be happy. His chest tightened, emotions welling up in his throat. He had spent so much time feeling alone in his grief, shutting everyone out, convinced that no one could truly understand. But maybe he had been wrong. Maybe there were still people who cared, people who wanted to walk this path with him, even when he felt lost. Slowly, he nodded, gripping the notebook a little tighter. Okay, I'll try. Mia beamed. Good. That's all that matters. They sat there a little longer, the candlelight dancing between them. And though the pain was still there, something new had started to take root. A quiet hope. As they finally stood to leave, he took one last look at his mother's grave and smiled. Good night, Mom. I'll see you again soon. And for the first time in a long time, he meant it. As they walked away from the cemetery, the cool night air wrapped around them like a quiet embrace. The candle had long since burned out, but its warmth lingered in his heart. Mia walked beside him, her steps steady and sure. He glanced at her, then at the small notebook she had given him. It felt strange to hold something that represented the future, something he had stopped thinking about ever since his mother passed. As they reached the main road, Mia turned to him. Do you want to grab some tea before heading home? He hesitated. Normally, he would have declined, finding excuses to be alone. But tonight, something was different. "Yeah," he said, surprising even himself. "That sounds nice." Mia smiled, and they walked side by side toward a small cafe down the street. It was quiet inside, the soft hum of music playing in the background. They ordered 2 cups of tea and sat by the window, watching the city lights flicker in the distance. For the first time in a long while, he found himself talking, not just about his mother, but about small, everyday things. He told Mia about a stray cat he had seen near his apartment, about the book he had started reading but never finished. She listened, laughing at his stories, sharing her own in return. Felt normal. And maybe that was what he needed, not to forget, but to learn how to live with the loss. To carry his mother's love in his heart without letting it weigh him down. As the night wore on, he pulled out the notebook. Flipping to the first page, he wrote his first entry. "Tonight, I shared a cup of tea with a friend, and for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel alone." He smiled to himself, closing the notebook. The grief would never fully disappear. He knew that. But now, he also knew that love never truly fades. His mother's warmth, her kindness, her laughter. They would always be with him, guiding him forward. And with each step, each new memory, he was learning to live again. As they left the cafe, Mia nudged him playfully. "Same time tomorrow?" He chuckled, shaking his head. "We'll see." But deep down, he already knew the answer. The stars twinkled above them as they walked, and for the first time in a long while, he looked up, not with sorrow, but with quiet hope. Somewhere, somehow, he knew his mother was smiling too.